You're about to journey down what locals call the loneliest road in America. U.S. Route 50 stretches across Nevada's barren desert landscape, where cell service drops and miles pass between signs of civilization. But some travelers who ventured onto this desolate highway never reached their destination. Tonight, we count down 8 chilling disappearances that continue to haunt this notorious stretch of asphalt. Lock your doors, though that didn't help the victims you're about to meet. The afternoon sun beat down on the small town of Oak Ridge the day the Martinez family vanished. July 16th, 1987 started as an ordinary Thursday. The grass needed cutting. The sprinklers clicked rhythmically against the summer heat. But by nightfall, the home at 418 Sycamore Drive stood empty, dinner half prepared on the kitchen counter, the television still murmuring in the living room. For people gone. No signs of struggle, no packed bags, no goodbye notes. Just the ghostly remains of interrupted lives, frozen in time like insects caught in amber. Sheriff Tom Kaplan received the call at 9:17 p.m. Rosa Diaz, the Martinez family's neighbor for 8 years, reported lights left on and the front door standing wide open. I knocked and called out, but nobody answered, she told dispatch, her voice trembling. Their car is still in the driveway. Something's wrong. The responding officers found an eerie stillness. Water boiled dry in a pot on the stove. A child's bicycle lay on its side in the front yard, rear wheel still spinning slowly in the evening breeze. The search began immediately. Miguel Martinez, 42, his wife Elena, 39, and their children Sophia, 15, and Lucas, 7, had seemingly evaporated into the warm summer air. Miguel's wallet sat on the hallway table. Elena's purse hung from a chair. For sets of house keys remained on their hook by the door. Even the family dog, a golden retriever named Rusty, was missing. The initial theory of foul play quickly hit roadblocks. No signs of forced entry, no blood, no apparent motive. The Martinez family wasn't wealthy. They had no known enemies. Miguel worked as a mechanic at the local garage, Elena as a nurse at Oak Ridge Community Hospital. Within days, the disappearance consumed a town of 8,700 residents. Volunteers combed the nearby woods and lake shores. News vans lined streets. Phones rang constantly at the sheriff's office. It was like the ground just opened up and swallowed them whole, one officer remarked. The FBI arrived a week later, turning the Martinez home inside out. They discovered only one anomaly. The family's photo albums contained gaps. Several pictures had been removed, leaving behind sticky residue on empty pages. FBI agent Diana Reeves found Sophia's diary hidden beneath the loose floorboard in her bedroom. The final entry, dated July 14th, read only. Dad says they're getting closer. We have to be ready. The cryptic message spawned 1,000 theories. Was Miguel in trouble? Running from someone? The family's bank accounts remained untouched. Their credit cards unused. Their social security numbers never appeared in any system again. The investigation uncovered peculiarities in the weeks before the disappearance. Elena had abruptly quit her nursing job without explanation. Miguel had been spotted by several witnesses buying large quantities of camping gear. Sophia had withdrawn from summer volleyball camp. Lucas had given his favorite toys to neighborhood friends, telling them he wouldn't need them anymore. These breadcrumbs pointed toward a planned departure, yet contradicted the scene at the house, a family interrupted mid-evening, as if they'd left in a sudden panic. As summer faded into fall, the case grew cold. The Martinez house stood empty, a neighborhood scar that children dared each other to approach after dark. Rumors twisted through town like poison ivy. Some claimed Miguel had been in witness protection, his cover blown. Others whispered about cult involvement, government experiments, even alien abduction. The truth remained elusive, slipping through investigators' fingers like morning mist. The FBI eventually departed, leaving behind boxes of futile evidence and unanswered questions. Then came the first postcard. It arrived at Rosa Diaz's home exactly 3 months after the disappearance, postmarked from Tucson, Arizona. No return address. No signature. Just 5 words in what experts confirmed was Elena's handwriting. "We are safe. Don't look." The postcard showed a desert sunset, cracked and worn as if it had traveled much farther than from Arizona. The FBI rushed agents to Tucson, but the trail had already gone cold. The Martinez family had become like smoke, visible for a moment, then scattered beyond reach. The Oak Ridge Sheriff's Department kept the case open, but the file gathered dust. Tom Kaplan would occasionally drive past 418 Sycamore, slowing to study the empty house, its paint peeling like dead skin from the walls. He couldn't shake the feeling that he'd missed something obvious, something right in front of his eyes. The Martinez family had slipped between the cracks of reality, leaving behind only questions that hung in the air like the last notes of a song. What could make 4 people and their dog disappear without a trace? What were they running from? Or running to? The second postcard arrived a year later at the sheriff's office. This one came from Washington State, showing dense, fog-shrouded forests. The message, again in Elena's handwriting, raised more questions than it answered. Sometimes disappearing is the only way to be found. By then, the town had mostly moved on. New families lived in different houses. Different scandals occupied the gossip circles. But for those closest to the investigation, the Martinez family had become an obsession, a splinter under the skin that couldn't be removed. In November 1988, a hunter found Rusty's collar in the National Forest 50 miles north of Oak Ridge. The faded tag still bore the Martinez name and address, but the collar had been deliberately cut, not torn or broken. When analyzed, the collar contained traces of soil not native to Oregon, soil that matched samples from northern New Mexico. The discovery reignited the investigation, sending agents to comb the desert landscapes near Los Alamos. They found nothing but wind and dust. 3 more postcards arrived over the next 4 years, each from a different state, each with a cryptic message in Elena's hand. The final card, postmarked December 1992, carried the most disturbing message yet. They were right. It wasn't safe to stay human. After that, silence fell like a heavy curtain. No more postcards. No more clues. The Martinez family case file grew thick with theories, but thin on answers. Some investigators believed the family had fled from a threat only they perceived. Perhaps mental illness had triggered a shared delusion. Others suspected involvement in something dangerous, drug trafficking, espionage, or a science experiment gone wrong. The Los Alamos connection particularly troubled federal agents, who quietly expanded their investigation to include government research facilities. Whatever the truth, the Martinez family had achieved something remarkable in an age before digital surveillance. They had disappeared completely, leaving behind only ripples in the lives they once touched. Sheriff Kaplan retired in 1995, the Martinez case still unsolved. At his retirement dinner, he confessed to his deputies that the disappearance had haunted his career like a phantom limb, always present in its absence. "Families don't just vanish," he told them, his voice heavy with the weight of unanswered questions. "People leave traces. They cast shadows. They make noise moving through the world. The Martinez family didn't disappear. They transformed into something we couldn't track, couldn't understand." He died 3 years later, the case file still stored in his home office. In 2002, during renovation of the old Martinez house, workers discovered a hidden compartment beneath the basement stairs. Inside lay a hand-drawn map, a set of coordinates, and a journal written in a code that has never been broken. The journal's cover bore a strange symbol, a triangle within a circle, bisected by a wavy line. The same symbol appeared in Miguel's personnel file at the auto shop where he'd worked. His boss claimed never to have noticed it before. The symbol matched nothing in FBI databases, but appeared identical to markings found at 3 abandoned research sites in the Nevada desert. What happened to the Martinez family that summer evening in 1987? Did they flee from danger or towards something beyond ordinary understanding? The postcards suggested they remained together, alive, moving with purpose. But their final message hinted at something more profound and terrifying, a transformation beyond the physical. The disappearance remains officially unsolved, a mystery that grows more impenetrable with each passing year. Their case has become a whisper past between amateur sleuths and conspiracy theorists, a black hole in the fabric of everyday reality. Perhaps the truth lies hidden in that encoded journal, waiting for someone to decipher its secrets. Perhaps it's scattered across the American landscape in the places marked by those mysterious postcards. Or perhaps, as Sheriff Kaplan suggested in his final notes on the case, we're asking the wrong questions entirely. The Martinez family didn't just disappear from Oak Ridge that summer evening. They disappeared from the lives they knew, the people they had been, and possibly from humanity itself. Some doors, once opened, lead to places from which there is no return, places that exist in the shadows between what we know and what we fear to discover. The quiet hum of Richard Kovacs' Peterbilt 379 had been his constant companion for 15 years. On that unusually cold November night in 2003, the veteran trucker sipped his lukewarm coffee while driving through the remote stretch of Montana's Highway 200. Snow fell in lazy spirals, illuminated in his high beams like falling stars against a pitch-black sky. The CB radio crackled occasionally with distant chatter, but mostly it was just Richard and the empty road stretching endlessly before him. He'd made this run dozens of times, hauling industrial equipment between Great Falls and Missoula. Nothing about tonight seemed different until 2:17 a.m., when his radio suddenly came to life with a strange, garbled transmission. Static hissed through the speakers as Richard reached to adjust the volume. At first, it sounded like typical interference, but then a voice emerged, distorted and strangely hollow. Coming through the pass. Headlights behind. Too close. The transmission cut out abruptly. Richard frowned, tapping the radio. Montana truckers were a tight community. They looked out for each other, especially in these remote stretches where help could be hours away. He keyed the mic, responding with his call sign, but received only static in return. The snowfall intensified, transforming from gentle flakes to a swirling curtain of white. Richard leaned forward, squinting through his windshield as visibility dropped to mere yards. His wipers struggled against the accumulating snow, sweeping across the glass like metronomes counting down to something unknown. The radio crackled again. The same voice, but clearer now. "They won't let me pass. Light's too bright. Can anyone hear me?" Richard responded immediately, but again, nothing came back except that persistent static, hanging in the cabin like an uninvited passenger. Every trucker knew the dangers of mountain passes in winter. Black ice waiting like invisible traps, sudden whiteouts that could erase the road entirely, steep drop-offs with no guardrails. The mountains didn't forgive mistakes. Richard checked his side mirrors, noticing for the first time a faint glow far behind him. Headlights, maybe, though they seemed to flicker and dance in a way that didn't match the steady beams of normal vehicles. He dismissed it as snow playing tricks on his tired eyes. The radio burst to life again with a transmission that made Richard's blood run cold. Something's wrong with the truck ahead. It's not right. The voice sounded frightened now, edging toward panic. The lights. Following me since Clearwater Junction. Richard felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. Clearwater Junction was 30 miles back. He was the only truck he'd seen since passing through there. If someone was reporting a truck ahead, they could only be talking about him. Gripping the wheel tighter, Richard keyed his mic again. "This is Big Sky 427. Who's coming up behind? Do you need assistance?" For several long seconds, there was nothing. Then the radio spoke once more, the voice now barely a whisper. "They're getting closer." The transmission ended with what sounded like a scream cut short by static. Richard's heart hammered against his ribs. He pressed down on the accelerator, even as his rational mind told him he was overreacting to some crossed signals or a prankster on the channels. The snow whipped furiously against his windshield, but Richard could still make out the reflective markers lining the road's edge. He took another sip of coffee, now gone completely cold, his throat tight with unexplained dread. The headlights behind him grew brighter, gaining ground with impossible speed. And as they drew closer, Richard realized with dawning horror that they didn't move like normal headlights at all. They seemed to float and weave, independent of any road beneath them. His CB radio fell silent, but the truck's electrical system began to flicker, dash lights dimming, then brightening, the engine missing beats like a faltering heart. Richard's hands trembled as he reached for the radio again. The static had given way to a low, rhythmic hum that seemed to pulse in time with the approaching lights. His voice cracked as he made what would become his final recorded transmission. "This is Richard Kovacs on Highway 200. Something's following me. The lights. They're not right. If anyone can hear this." But the rest of his message was lost as the radio died completely. The dashboard went dark. Even the headlights flickered and dimmed. Richard Kovacs was now alone in the storm with whatever approached from behind. The Montana Highway Patrol found Richard's truck the next morning, parked neatly on the shoulder of Highway 200, hazard lights blinking steadily in the bright morning sun. The engine was cold. The doors were locked. The CB radio was still on, though when officers tested it, it worked perfectly. But Richard Kovacs was gone, vanished without footprints in the fresh snow. His coffee cup remained half full on the center console, no longer steaming, but somehow not yet frozen despite the sub-zero temperatures. His logbook showed his last entry at 2:15 a.m., just minutes before his strange transmission. The only clue to his disappearance was a final message scrawled hastily on the back page. Not headlights. Not a truck. They found me. The search for Richard Kovacs lasted 2 weeks. Helicopters scanned the dense forests flanking Highway 200. Tracking dogs followed phantom trails that ended abruptly, as if Richard had simply vanished mid-step. Investigators interviewed every trucker who had been on that stretch of highway that night. Most reported nothing unusual, just a heavy snowfall and poor visibility. But 3 drivers, all traveling separate routes miles apart, described hearing the same transmission, a man's terrified voice talking about strange lights following him, cutting out with what sounded like a scream. None had recognized the voice as Richard's at the time. As the investigation progressed, an unusual pattern emerged. Highway Patrol records showed that over the past decade, 3 other truckers had gone missing along the same stretch of Montana's Highway 200, all during winter months, all in severe weather. Like Richard, their trucks were found properly parked with no signs of struggle. Like Richard, each had made unusual radio transmissions about lights following them before they disappeared. The cases had never been connected until now, scattered across different jurisdictions and years apart. The coincidence was too striking to ignore, yet investigators could find no conventional explanation. The CB radio from Richard's truck was sent to the FBI laboratory for analysis. Technicians discovered something odd. The radio contained recordings of transmissions that couldn't be explained. When played back, they captured a confusing jumble of voices, some that seemed to be Richard's final calls for help, but others that were older, much older. Buried in the static were fragments of distress calls dating back to the 1970s, all from truckers who had traveled that same stretch of highway. Some of these voices belonged to drivers who were still alive and had no memory of making such transmissions. Others belonged to drivers who, like Richard, had vanished without a trace. Locals had long whispered about the strange properties of Highway 200 during winter storms. They called that particular section Echo Pass, not because of any geological feature, but because of what happened there. Old-timers claimed the pass sometimes folded time back on itself during the worst blizzards, like pages of a book pressed together. They said a driver could suddenly find themselves sharing the road with vehicles from the past or future, phantom traffic that appeared only as unexplained lights in snowstorms. Richard's wife refused to accept these superstitious explanations. She maintained that someone had taken her husband, though she couldn't explain how or why. 6 months after Richard's disappearance, a highway maintenance worker made a disturbing discovery. While clearing drainage ditches along Highway 200, he found Richard's trucker cap wedged under a culvert nearly 5 miles from where his truck had been found. The cap was in pristine condition despite months of harsh weather, no fading, no damage, as if it had been placed there recently. Even more bizarrely, when the worker picked it up, his radio scanner suddenly activated, playing what sounded like Richard's final transmission. The worker swore he hadn't touched the scanner, and when investigators tested it later, they could not reproduce the phenomenon. The case of Richard Kovacs remains officially unsolved. His body was never recovered, and no definitive explanation for his disappearance was ever established. Yet truckers driving Highway 200 still report occasional strange broadcasts coming through their CB radios during winter storms. A man's voice, urgent and afraid, warning about lights that follow too closely. Most dismiss it as radio interference or a twisted joke. But veteran drivers know better. They avoid that stretch of Highway 200 during snowstorms. They drive with their radios turned off. And if they see headlights gaining on them too quickly through swirling snow, they pull over and wait, engines idling, until the lights pass by, or until morning comes. And sometimes, if you drive that lonely highway late at night, when snow is falling thick and heavy, you might see a Peterbilt 379 pulled neatly to the shoulder, hazard lights blinking steadily. By the time you circle back to check on the driver, the truck will be gone, leaving no tracks in the freshly fallen snow, just like Richard Kovacs and his final radio call on that November night in 2003, echoing endlessly through the static, searching for someone to hear his warning before the lights catch up to him once again. Memorial Day weekend, 1976. The sun baked the asphalt of Route 16 as families in station wagons and sedans headed for beaches and barbecues across New Hampshire. State Trooper Mike Conley wiped sweat from his brow as he patrolled the highway, radio crackling with reports of minor fender benders and speeders. Nothing serious. Not yet, anyway. He'd been on the force for 15 years, and holiday weekends always brought trouble. Like clockwork. But what happened that weekend would haunt him until his dying day. The call came in just past noon. A blue Ford Country Squire station wagon parked on the shoulder near mile marker 78. Engine running. Doors unlocked. Nobody inside. Mike flipped on his lights and pulled behind it, squinting through the windshield glare. The station wagon sat empty, like a boat abandoned at sea. No luggage in the back, no personal items visible. Just a family vehicle without its family. The keys dangled in the ignition, the radio softly playing the Eagles' Hotel California. The passenger seat held a map unfolded to show the lake's region. A half-drunk bottle of Coca-Cola, still cold with condensation, rested in the cup holder. Mike ran his hand across the hood. Warm. The car had been running maybe 30 minutes. He radioed in the license plate, registered to Thomas and Caroline Whitaker from Concord. Family of 4, 2 kids, ages 8 and 10. Where the hell did they go? Mike muttered, scanning the tree line. The dense New Hampshire woods offered no answers, just the rustle of leaves in the warm breeze. He checked the surrounding area. No footprints leading away from the vehicle, no sign of struggle, no skid marks on the pavement. It was as if the family had simply evaporated into the summer air, leaving behind only the soft hum of the engine and that eerie, prophetic song about a place you can never leave. The investigation began immediately. Officers combed the woods while helicopters scanned from above. Local volunteers formed search parties that stretched for miles. Bloodhounds picked up scents at the car, but lost them within yards. Another impossibility that made the hairs on Mike's neck stand up. The Whitakers had vanished without a trace, as completely as if they'd been snatched by some unseen force. The media descended like vultures. "Family of 4 disappears on holiday weekend," screamed the headlines. Reporters thrust microphones in Mike's face, demanding answers he didn't have. Theories multiplied faster than the mosquitoes in the summer heat. Some said the Whitakers had planned their disappearance, running from debts or troubles. Others whispered about kidnapping, though no ransom demands ever came. The more superstitious locals spoke in hushed tones about the woods themselves, how they sometimes swallowed people whole. Back at the station, Mike stared at the family photo provided by Caroline's sister. Thomas with his broad smile and thinning hair. Caroline looking radiant in a sundress. The children, Emma and Jake, grinning with gap-toothed innocence. A normal, happy family erased from existence in the middle of a sunny holiday afternoon. The clock on the wall ticked loudly as the first day of the investigation wound down with nothing to show. No clues. No witnesses. No Whitakers. But what baffled investigators most was the condition of the car. The gas tank was 3/4 full. The engine ran perfectly. There was no sign that the Whitakers had stopped because of car trouble. The only unusual element was the temperature inside the vehicle, several degrees cooler than outside, as though the air conditioning had been running at maximum capacity. Yet the dial was set to low. Something didn't add up, and the inconsistencies multiplied like fractures in ice. Days stretched into weeks. The empty station wagon became both symbol and puzzle, an ordinary family vehicle transformed into the epicenter of New Hampshire's most disturbing mystery. Mike found himself returning to it in the police impound lot, sitting in the driver's seat, trying to channel some echo of what happened. The car held its secrets tight, like a tomb preserving the final moments before the Whitakers stepped out and into oblivion. Mike couldn't shake the feeling that the answer was right in front of him, hiding in plain sight like a predator perfectly camouflaged against its background. And then came the first letter, hand-delivered to the police station exactly 1 month after the disappearance. No postmark, no fingerprints. Inside the plain white envelope, a single sheet of paper with 5 words typed in the center. Look deeper into the woods. No signature. The paper was common stock available at any store. The typeface matched a standard Smith Corona typewriter, impossible to trace. Was it a taunt from a kidnapper? A clue from a witness? Or something else entirely? Something that made Mike's stomach churn with unease? The search resumed with renewed urgency. Officers dug through layers of forest debris, probed the earth for disturbed soil, drained small ponds. Nothing. The woods revealed nothing except their own ancient indifference to human suffering. Like a cruel magician, they had made 4 people vanish without revealing their secret. The case began its slow slide from active investigation to cold mystery, from headline to footnote, from urgent priority to occasional reminder. Except for Mike. He couldn't let go. The empty station wagon haunted his dreams. Sometimes he saw it filled with screaming children, sometimes with nothing but shadows. His marriage began to crack under the weight of his obsession. His wife complained that even when he was home, his mind was out there on Route 16, circling that abandoned Ford like a moth around a flame. She wasn't wrong. The Whitaker case had sunk hooks into his soul that no amount of time or distance could remove. The second letter arrived 6 months later. This time, the message read, "They're still here." They never left. The forensics team found nothing useful, no DNA, No fingerprints, not even a hair fiber. Just another ghost note from someone who either knew too much or wanted the police to think they did. Mike pinned it to his growing caseboard at home, connecting it with red yarn to other clues that led nowhere. His colleagues worried about him, whispered that Conley was losing it, that the Whitaker case was consuming him like a cancer. Then came the dreams. Vivid nightmares where Mike found himself driving the country squired down endless forest roads. In the rearview mirror, he could see the Whitaker family sitting silently in the back, their eyes black pools, their mouths moving without sound. He would wake gasping, sheets soaked with sweat, the phantom scent of pine, and something else, something old and wrong, filling his nostrils. His doctor prescribed sleeping pills. They didn't help. Nothing helped except working the case, turning it over and over like a puzzle box that refused to open. 1 year to the day after the disappearance, Mike found himself back at mile marker 78. The shoulder of the road had been widened since then, the nearby trees trimmed back. Nobody remembered anymore what had happened here. The world had moved on to fresh tragedies, fresh mysteries. He stood alone in the late spring sunshine, listening to the drone of passing cars and the distant calls of birds in the forest. "Where are you?" he whispered to the trees. "What happened to you?" The forest kept its silence. But as Mike turned to leave, something caught his eye, a flash of blue among the green, about 50 yards into the woods. His heart thundering, he pushed through underbrush and over fallen logs, ignoring the thorns that tore at his uniform. There, in a small clearing, stood an old blue Ford Country Squire. Not just similar, identical to the Whitaker vehicle currently sitting in the police impound lot. Impossible. Yet there it was, untouched by the elements, looking as if it had been parked there just moments ago. The driver's door stood open, inviting. The keys dangled from the ignition, and on the passenger seat lay a Polaroid photograph that made Mike's blood freeze in his veins, a picture of himself standing on the roadside just minutes earlier, taken from the exact spot where this duplicate car now waited. Written on the white border of the photo in neat block letters, "Your turn." Sarah Weston woke to a chill in the air. Their honeymoon cottage, a century-old stone structure perched on England's northern coast, trapped the October cold like a vault. Her new husband James still slept beside her, his breath forming tiny clouds above the blankets. 3 days into their honeymoon, and the romance of the isolated cottage had already begun to fade like morning mist. The rental agent had called it charming and secluded. Now, those words felt like warnings. The cottage stood alone on a rocky bluff, half a mile from the nearest neighbor. Its weathered stone walls had witnessed 100 winters, its wooden beams darkened by decades of fireplace smoke. Sarah pulled the blankets tighter and listened to the constant whisper of the sea against the cliffs below. Something about this place felt wrong. Not just old or uncomfortable, but wrong in a way that made her skin prickle. She slipped from bed, her bare feet recoiling from the icy floorboards. The wedding had been perfect, their families together, champagne flowing, promises made with tearful eyes. This trip was supposed to extend that magic. Instead, Sarah found herself counting days until they could return to London. The cottage had seemed quaint online. The stone fireplace, the exposed beams, the clawfoot tub. Now those features seemed less charming and more like relics from a time best forgotten. Sarah moved to the kitchen and filled the ancient kettle. As she waited for it to boil, her gaze fell on the small door in the corner of the room. It was the only door in the cottage that remained locked. The rental agent had apologized, explaining the owner used it for personal storage and kept the key. Something about that door nagged at Sarah's thoughts like a loose thread she couldn't stop pulling. Outside, the wind picked up, sending a moan through the chimney. The kettle whistled, a piercing note in the quiet cottage. As she poured her tea, Sarah noticed something on the window, a handprint, small and perfect, pressed against the outside of the glass. A child's handprint. It hadn't been there yesterday. She set down her cup with shaking hands. The nearest family, with children, lived miles away in the village. James appeared in the doorway, hair tousled from sleep. "You're up early," he said, wrapping his arms around her. Sarah didn't mention the handprint. She didn't want to seem paranoid on their honeymoon. Instead, she suggested they explore the village. Anything to get out of the cottage for a few hours. James agreed, kissing her forehead, oblivious to her unease. But as they prepared to leave, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling they were being watched by unseen eyes. The village consisted of a cluster of stone buildings, a church with a square tower, and a single pub called the Mariner's Rest. The locals were friendly but reserved, their accents thick as honey. In the pub, Sarah and James ordered lunch, grateful for the crackling fire and normal human contact. When the barmaid asked where they were staying, her smile stiffened at their answer. The old Collins place? On North Point. The woman's weathered face creased with concern. Not many stay there these days. James laughed. "We got it cheap. Perfect for newlyweds on a budget." The barmaid nodded but didn't laugh. She leaned closer, her voice dropping. "Just mind the tides. And it's best not to wander the property after dark." Before they could ask what she meant, she hurried away to serve another customer, leaving their questions hanging in the air like smoke. Sarah felt a chill run through her body, cold as the October sea. James dismissed the warning as local superstition, but Sarah couldn't shake it off so easily. She thought of the locked door, the child's handprint, the constant feeling of being observed. These weren't just ghost stories. Something felt deeply wrong about their honeymoon cottage. As they walked back along the coastal path, the sun began its early autumn descent. The cottage appeared on the horizon, lonely against the darkening sky. Sarah paused, struck by how isolated they truly were. No neighbors, no passing cars. No one would hear them if they called for help. And as they drew closer, she noticed something that made her heart stutter. All the lights in the cottage were on. Every single one. They had definitely turned them all off before leaving. James didn't miss a step. "Must be electrical issues in these old places," he said, squeezing her hand. Sarah nodded, but she knew better. Someone or something had been in their cottage. Sarah struggled to sleep that night. The wind had transformed into a howling gale, battering the cottage windows like angry fists. James slept soundly beside her, untroubled by the storm or the strange occurrences. Every creak of the old structure sent Sarah's heart racing. Around midnight, she heard footsteps, light and quick, moving across the floor above their bedroom. The rental listing had specified one floor. There shouldn't be an above. She nudged James awake, her voice a frightened whisper. "There's someone upstairs." James listened, his face transitioning from sleepy confusion to alert concern. The footsteps continued, now accompanied by what sounded like a child's laughter, faint but unmistakable. "Stay here," he ordered, reaching for his phone's flashlight. "Don't leave me alone," Sarah pleaded, clutching his arm. The footsteps stopped abruptly, replaced by a heavy silence more frightening than the noise. Then came a new sound, a slow, deliberate scratching at the ceiling, directly above their bed. James aimed his light upward. There, spreading across the wooden beams like spilled ink, appeared words being carved in real time. "Welcome home, Collins." The letters formed slowly, one painful scrape at a time, as if carved by invisible fingers. Sarah screamed, scrambling from the bed. James stood frozen, his light illuminating the impossible message. According to the rental agent, the cottage had been vacant for years, used only as a holiday let. No one named Collins lived here. But as they watched in horror, more words appeared. "You look just like them." They fled the bedroom, racing toward the front door. James fumbled with the lock, his hands shaking violently. The door wouldn't budge, sealed as if welded shut. Behind them, the locked storage door in the kitchen began to rattle, its hinges straining against an unseen force. A child's voice, clear as a bell, called out from behind it. "Mommy? Daddy? I've been waiting so long." The temperature in the cottage plummeted, their breath visible in the sudden cold. Sarah clutched James, both backed against the front door. "This isn't happening," James repeated, his scientific mind refusing to process what his eyes witnessed. The kitchen door splintered, with cracking as something pushed from the other side. A photograph fell from the mantel, a picture they'd placed there of themselves on their wedding day. It hit the floor, glass shattering. When Sarah glanced down, the image had changed. Instead of their faces, an unfamiliar couple stared back, a man and woman in early 20th century clothing. The man bore an uncanny resemblance to James. Below the image, faded handwriting read, "Thomas and Mary Collins, 1911. The storage door burst open. From the darkness beyond emerged not a physical presence, but a swirling mist that coalesced into the translucent figure of a small boy. His clothes were old-fashioned, his face pale but eager. "You've come back," he whispered, his voice echoing as if from a great distance. "You promised you would." The walls began to bleed a dark liquid, running down in rivulets like tears. The boy's expression shifted from joy to rage. "You said you'd never leave again." The cottage trembled, dishes shattering in the kitchen, furniture sliding across the floor. The boy's form grew more solid with each passing second, his eyes now hollow pits of darkness. Through the window, Sarah spotted lights in the distance, villagers with torches, moving quickly toward the cottage. One of them held what looked like an old book. Their determined march suggested they knew exactly what was happening. These occurrences weren't new to them. James managed to force a window open. He helped Sarah through first, then scrambled after her. They ran toward the approaching lights, away from the cottage that now glowed with an unnatural blue light. As they reached the villagers, an elderly man stepped forward, the book clutched to his chest. "It happens every October," he explained grimly. "The Collins family, they drowned in 1911 when their boat capsized. Their son was left alone in the cottage for days before anyone found him. He starved, waiting for parents who never returned." The man opened his book, revealing newspaper clippings and photographs. Every few years, the cottage finds new occupants who resemble Thomas and Mary. It tries to make things right. As the group watched, the blue light from the cottage intensified, then extinguished like a snuffed candle. A child's wail carried on the wind, a sound of such profound loneliness that tears sprang to Sarah's eyes. "What happens now?" James asked, his arm protective around Sarah's shoulders. The old man closed his book with a heavy sigh. "You leave and never return. And we wait for the next couple who doesn't know our history." He gestured toward the village. "Come. You'll stay at the inn tonight." As they walked away, Sarah glanced back one last time. A small figure stood in the cottage window, a boy with hollow eyes, watching them abandon him again. His hand pressed against the glass in the same print she'd seen that morning. Sarah turned away, unable to bear his gaze. Sometimes the past refuses to release its grip, she thought. Some wounds never heal, echoing through time like a child's unanswered cry. In the morning, they would return to London and their normal lives. But Sarah knew the cottage would remain, waiting on its lonely cliff, ready to welcome the next couple who might finally bring its lost child peace. August 1994 began like any other summer month in rural Texas. Heat shimmered off the pavement, turning highways into mirages that seemed to stretch endlessly toward the horizon. For Darlene and Sarah Henderson, two sisters in their early 20s, This was to be their last adventure before Sarah left for college in California. They packed their faded blue Chevy Impala with snacks, mixtapes, and enough clothes for a week-long road trip through the Southwest. Neither could have imagined that their names would soon become linked to one of the most baffling disappearances in Texas history. The sisters were as close as siblings could be, despite being opposites in nearly every way. Darlene, 23, was practical and responsible, with short brown hair and a serious expression that matched her accounting job at the local bank. Sarah, barely 19, was a dreamer with wild blonde curls and a camera perpetually hanging from her neck. Their parents had died 3 years earlier in a car accident, leaving the sisters with nothing but each other and the old family home they'd been eager to escape, if only temporarily. They left their small town of Millfield on August 12th, waving goodbye to neighbors as they drove off. Their first planned stop was the Carlsbad Caverns in New Mexico. From there, they would wind their way through Arizona, briefly touch the edge of Utah, and circle back through Colorado before returning home. It was all carefully mapped out on the road atlas spread across Sarah's lap as they drove west into the setting sun. The Impala's radio blared Pearl Jam and Nirvana as they crossed the state line, singing along with windows down, their voices carried away by the warm desert wind. The last confirmed sighting of the Henderson sisters was at a gas station just outside Carlsbad on August 13th. The attendant later told police they seemed happy, normal girls on vacation, purchasing sodas and filling up their tank around 7 p.m. Security footage showed them laughing, Sarah taking pictures of Darlene posing next to a giant roadside statue of a jackrabbit. They asked the attendant for directions to an inexpensive motel and thanked him with bright smiles. In the grainy video, their Impala pulls away, turning left toward the highway, an ordinary moment that would become the last trace of their existence. When the sisters failed to call their aunt in Millfield after 3 days as promised, concern began to grow. By August 18th, a missing persons report was filed. Their credit cards hadn't been used since the Carlsbad gas station. Their motel reservation, made in advance at the Desert Rose Inn, showed they never checked in. The Henderson sisters and their blue Impala had vanished like water droplets on hot asphalt, leaving no trace behind. Initial searches focused on the routes between Carlsbad and their next planned destination, the Grand Canyon. Police bulletins went out across 4 states. Local news aired their photographs, Darlene's serious face in her bank employee ID, Sarah's carefree smile from her high school graduation. The story of 2 orphan sisters disappearing on a final adventure together captured public attention. Volunteers combed roadsides and ravines. Helicopter searches scanned remote areas. Nothing was found, no skid marks suggesting an accident, no abandoned car, no bodies. They had evaporated from the face of the earth. The case might have faded into obscurity, becoming just another unsolved mystery, if not for what happened 3 weeks later. A package arrived at the Millfield police station, postmarked from Las Vegas. Inside was Sarah Henderson's camera. The film had been developed, showing the sisters' journey up to their stop at Carlsbad. The final 3 photographs, however, were what turned the disappearance into legend. They showed a desert road at twilight, an unidentified metal structure reflecting the setting sun, and finally, most disturbingly, what appeared to be a bright light in the night sky, hovering over their car. The Henderson sisters' last road trip remains one of the Southwest's enduring mysteries. Their blue Impala was never recovered. Their bodies were never found. Their bank accounts remained untouched. It was as if they had driven off the map of the known world, leaving behind only rumors and questions. Some claimed alien abduction, pointing to those final photographs as evidence. Others suspected a more human predator who knew how to make people disappear in the vast desert wilderness. Whatever happened on that August night in 1994 turned a simple sisters' road trip into something far more unsettling, a journey with no known destination. 25 years after their disappearance, the legend of the Henderson sisters took an unexpected turn. A night manager at a small motel in northern Arizona was clearing out an old storage room when he found a dusty journal wedged behind a filing cabinet. The faded entry on the first page read, "Property of Sarah Henderson, August 1994. The discovery sent shockwaves through the cold case community and reopened wounds in Millfield that had never fully healed." The journal's contents would challenge everything investigators thought they knew about the sisters' fate. The journal itself became a roadmap of contradictions. The early entries matched what everyone knew. Two sisters excited about their trip, stopping at tourist traps, taking photos of desert sunsets. Sarah wrote about Darlene's anxiety over leaving their home for so long and her own dreams of California beaches waiting at the journey's end. But entries from August 13th, the day after their last confirmed sighting, took a strange turn. Sarah described tension between the sisters, a growing paranoia about a black truck that seemed to be following them from town to town. "Darlene says I'm imagining things," she wrote, "but I've seen it 4 times now, always at a distance, always disappearing when we try to get a better look." The journal described the sisters taking an unplanned detour onto a smaller highway after spotting the truck again near Carlsbad. According to Sarah's increasingly frantic handwriting, they drove for hours on unmarked roads, trying to lose their pursuer. Night fell. They became lost in a landscape of identical mesas and arroyos. Their maps showed nothing but wilderness where they found themselves. And then, most chillingly, Sarah described lights, not from above as the photographs had suggested, but from below, emanating from what appeared to be a facility of some kind nestled in a remote canyon. "It looks like a research station or military base, but there's nothing marked on our maps," Sarah wrote. "Darlene wants to ask for directions, but something feels wrong about this place. The fence has warnings in languages I don't recognize. We're going to drive on and try to find a main road before our gas gets too low." This was the last coherent entry. The final page contained only scattered words. "Lights, can't start car. People coming, not people, help." When investigators tracked down the motel where the journal was found, they discovered it had changed ownership 6 times since 1994. None of the current staff recognized photos of the Henderson sisters. How the journal ended up there remained as mysterious as the disappearance itself. Forensic analysis confirmed the handwriting matched Sarah's school papers, but this only deepened the puzzle. If the sisters had encountered something in that remote canyon, how did the journal find its way to a motel hundreds of miles away? The discovery sparked renewed searches of the area described in the journal. Satellite images revealed nothing unusual. No unmarked facilities, no secret bases. The renewed investigation hit the same dead ends as the original. Some suggested the journal itself might be an elaborate hoax, though experts disputed this. Others believed Sarah's final entries showed signs of extreme stress or hallucination, perhaps caused by dehydration or isolation in the desert. The Henderson case had gained a new piece to its puzzle, but the picture remained incomplete. What we do know is that somewhere in the vast southwestern desert, the story of 2 sisters ended or perhaps transformed into something beyond our understanding. Their blue Impala might be buried under 25 years of shifting sands. Their fate might be locked in classified files or exist only in the imagination of whoever last saw them alive. The Henderson sisters' final road trip continues to haunt those who remember them, a journey that began with mixtapes and laughter and ended with a journal of impossible things found in a forgotten corner of Arizona. In 2018, a retired sheriff's deputy named Jim Cortez came forward with information he claimed had been suppressed during the original investigation. Cortez had been a junior officer assisting with the Henderson case in 1994. According to his statement, search teams did find something in those first crucial weeks, not the sisters or their car, but a section of desert where radiation readings spiked to alarming levels. The area had been quickly cordoned off by individuals Cortez described as government types in unmarked vehicles. The location was scrubbed from official reports, and searchers were told to focus elsewhere. Cortez kept silent for decades, fearing repercussions, but terminal cancer diagnosis had freed him from concern for his career or reputation. His claims aligned disturbingly well with the later discovered journal entries about an unmarked facility. Researchers identified the approximate location from Cortez's description, a remote area straddling the New Mexico-Arizona border, known locally as the Dead Echo Canyon for its unusual acoustics. Historical satellite images from 1992-1995 showed the canyon was largely obscured by what analysts called intentional pixel distortion, the digital equivalent of a redacted document. Modern images show nothing but empty desert, though ground access to the area remains strangely restricted by a patchwork of private property and ambiguous government land designations. For the families left behind in Millfield, these developments reopened wounds that had never fully healed. Darlene was supposed to have been maid of honor at her best friend's wedding the month after she vanished. Her bank kept her position open for 6 months, unable to believe she'd simply abandoned her life. Sarah had been accepted to film school with a partial scholarship, her talent recognized despite her small-town background. Their aunt, now in her 70s, still maintains their childhood home, convinced they might someday walk through the door with an explanation for their 25-year absence. The house stands like a time capsule of 1994, Sarah's movie posters still on the walls, Darlene's reading glasses still on her nightstand. The Henderson sisters' disappearance belongs to a peculiar category of missing persons cases that haunt the American Southwest. The region's vast empty spaces have swallowed travelers before, but rarely so completely, with so few clues left behind. Their case exists at the uncomfortable intersection between verified facts, conspiracy theories, and the human need for closure. We want to believe the sisters found an ending, even a tragic one, rather than accept the void their absence created, a story without a final page. Perhaps the most poignant artifact from the case isn't the mysterious journal or the enigmatic photos, but a simple postcard found in Sarah's room after they vanished. Addressed to her best friend but never sent, it read, "Road trips are about the journey, not the destination, but I promise we'll be home soon with the best stories to tell." Whatever story the Henderson sisters found on that desert highway in August 1994, it remains untold, waiting like a mirage on the horizon of memory, shimmering but forever out of reach. The old Stetson Medical Center stood abandoned on the edge of town, its weathered facade a stark reminder of a bygone era. The building's windows, many now broken, stared out like hollow eyes across the overgrown parking lot. It was here, on a rainy April morning in 2008, that urban explorer Casey Williams made a discovery that would haunt the local community for years to come. While photographing the hospital's decaying interior for her blog, Casey stumbled upon a vintage leather medical bag tucked away in a forgotten corner of the East Wing. The name tag, though faded, was still legible. Dr. Michael Chang, Neurology. What Casey didn't know then was that she had just uncovered the first piece of a medical mystery that had remained buried for nearly 3 decades. The medical bag sat untouched in that abandoned corridor since 1979, when Dr. Chang vanished without a trace. His disappearance came just days after reporting a series of unusual neurological symptoms in patients from a small mining community 20 miles outside of town. The leather case, cracked and dried from years of neglect, contained ordinary medical tools, a stethoscope, reflex hammer, and penlight, but also a small notebook filled with hurried observations and drawings that made little sense to Casey's untrained eye. The pages showed bizarre sketches of what appeared to be brain tissue with anomalous structures, nothing like the diagrams in modern medical texts. Casey's photographs of the bag and its contents spread quickly across internet forums dedicated to unsolved mysteries and medical oddities. The images caught the attention of Dr. Rebecca Torres, a neurologist at the State University, who recognized the potential significance of Chang's notes. "These drawings represent something I've never seen before in medical literature," she commented on Casey's blog. "It's as if he was documenting a completely unknown condition of the brain." The notebook contained references to Patient Zero, a miner named Thomas Reeves who had reportedly experienced vivid hallucinations and uncontrollable muscle spasms before his admission to Stetson Medical Center in early 1979. Local newspaper archives revealed that in the 3 months before Dr. Chang's disappearance, 7 miners from the same facility had been admitted with similar symptoms. Each case progressed from mild tremors to severe neurological decline within weeks. The strangest detail came from the final pages of Chang's notebook, where his typically neat handwriting grew increasingly erratic. His last entry, dated April 18, 1979, contained just one line: "It's not in their minds. It's in the earth." The words stood out on the page, pressed so deeply into the paper that they had nearly torn through, as if carved in a moment of desperate clarity. The abandoned mine where the affected workers had been employed sat 5 miles from the hospital, its entrance now sealed with concrete and warning signs. Geological surveys from that period showed high concentrations of an unidentified metallic compound in samples taken from the deepest shafts. These findings were documented but never published in any scientific journal, and the surveys themselves were mysteriously pulled from public records in late 1979. The timing aligned perfectly with the final days anyone reported seeing Dr. Chang at the hospital. His car was found in the staff parking lot, keys still in the ignition, but the doctor had simply vanished like morning mist burned away by the sun. What troubled investigators most wasn't just Chang's disappearance, but the fact that all 7 patients were discharged on the same day by an administrator who later claimed to have no memory of signing the paperwork. None of the miners ever returned home. When families went looking, they found empty houses with half-eaten meals still on tables, as if the occupants had stepped out momentarily but never intended to leave. And deeper still in Chang's notes, barely legible in the margins of the final pages, repeated over and over, "They hear it calling. So do I. The discovery of Dr. Chang's bag opened wounds long scarred over in the small community." Former hospital staff, now elderly, spoke reluctantly about those final days before the doctor vanished. Night shift nurse Elaine Mercer recalled finding Chang in the radiology department at 3 a.m., developing brain scans that he refused to let anyone else see. "He looked like he hadn't slept in days," she told the local newspaper in a rare interview. "When I asked if he was okay, he just said, 'They're changing, Elaine. Their brains are changing.' The next day, he didn't show up for his morning rounds." Hospital maintenance logs showed that the East Wing, where Casey found the bag, had been scheduled for renovation in May 1979, but work was abruptly canceled. The wing was sealed off instead, with all patient records from that section removed from the archives. Former Administrator Gerald Tompkins, now in his 80s, claimed the decision came directly from the State Health Department, though no official documentation of this order exists in state records. When pressed about the missing patients and Dr. Chang, Tompkins would only say, "Some things are better left forgotten." That doctor was seeing things that weren't there, but the evidence suggested otherwise. Among the items in Chang's bag was a small glass vial containing what appeared to be cerebrospinal fluid, somehow preserved despite the decades. When Dr. Torres secretly analyzed the sample, she found microscopic metallic particles that matched the composition of those found in the mine samples. More disturbing still were the cellular structures surrounding these particles, neural tissue that had begun to form unprecedented connections, creating what Torres described as a secondary neural network overlaying the primary brain structure. It was as if the brain tissue was reorganizing itself around these foreign particles, forming a new kind of neural architecture. Local authorities downplayed the significance of Casey's find, suggesting the bag was merely forgotten during the hospital's hasty closure in 1990. But this explanation failed to account for the locked cabinet where the bag was found, or why Dr. Chang's personal effects would be stored in an unused section of the hospital. The official position remained at DR. Chang had likely suffered a mental breakdown and left town, despite his car remaining in the parking lot and his bank accounts untouched. His medical license was eventually revoked for abandonment of patients, a final bureaucratic full stop on a career that vanished as mysteriously as the man himself. The trail might have gone cold there if not for Thomas Reeves' grandson, Mark, who came forward after seeing Casey's blog post. He produced a letter his grandfather had written just days before being admitted to Stetson Medical Center. The paper had yellowed with age, but the message was clear. Something's in my head now, Mary. The first can feel it moving when I'm still. Doctor, Chang says it's from the new shaft. Says we woke something up down there in the dark. I keep hearing voices when nobody's talking. They're telling me to go back to the mine. The letter trembled in Mark's hands as he shared it, a paper ghost from a grandfather he never knew. Doctor, Torres petitioned to have the sealed mine shaft reopened for scientific investigation, citing potential public health concerns. Her requests were repeatedly denied by county officials, who insisted the site posed no threat. Frustrated by the roadblocks, Torres and Casey organized an unauthorized expedition to the mine in late 2008. What they found at the sealed entrance changed everything they thought they understood about the case. The concrete barrier showed signs of damage, not from the outside pushing in, but from something inside the mine pushing out. The massive seal, reinforced with steel bars, had hairline fractures spreading outward like a web. Most telling was the small opening, no wider than a fist, where the concrete had crumbled away near the ground. Around this hole, Torres discovered the same metallic dust that had been present in Chang's samples, glittering under her flashlight beam like tiny stars fallen to earth. When she placed her recorder near the opening, the digital device captured what sounded like whispers, too faint to make out words, but unmistakably human in rhythm and tone. Casey, standing nearby, swore she heard her name called from the darkness beyond the seal, though Torres heard nothing of the sort. The two women left quickly, both shaken by the experience, but for different reasons. Torres by the scientific impossibility of what she'd found, and Casey by the unsettling certainty that something inside the mine knew they were there. The recordings, when analyzed later at Torres' lab, contained frequencies that shouldn't have been possible, sound patterns that, when visualized, resembled the abnormal neural pathways in Chang's drawings. It was as if whatever waited behind that concrete barrier wasn't just making noise. It was attempting to communicate directly with human brain architecture. Perhaps most chilling was Casey's realization, weeks after their visit to the mine, that her own handwriting had begun to change, growing more angular and precise, becoming eerily similar to the deteriorating script in Dr. Chang's final notebook entries. The sun was setting on an empty dirt road when 3 mobile phones were found abandoned among trampled grass. No one knew how they got there. No one knew where their owners had gone. All that was left in this remote stretch of the Nevada desert was a rental car, camera equipment worth thousands of dollars, and footprints that led nowhere. The photography crew of Lens and Light magazine had vanished without a trace, becoming one of the most baffling disappearances in recent memory. It began as a routine assignment. Mark Denton, lead photographer, along with his assistant Carly Reese and journalist Ben Harper, left Las Vegas on June 9, 2015. Their mission was simple: capture the desert's stark beauty for a magazine feature. The trio checked into a motel in Rachel, a tiny town on the edge of Area 51, and sent their first photos back to their editor that evening. Everything seemed normal. Their text messages were upbeat, focused on the next day's shoot near Groom Lake Road. Got some killer shots today, Mark texted his girlfriend that night. Heading deeper into the desert tomorrow. Signal might be spotty. These would be his final words to anyone outside the crew. When the group failed to return their rental car on June 12th, the alarm was raised. Credit cards hadn't been used. Phone records showed their devices had gone dark simultaneously at 3:47 p.m. on June 10th. Search teams combed the desert for days. Helicopters swept the vast emptiness. Thermal imaging revealed nothing, as if the earth had opened up and swallowed them whole. The rental car was discovered 5 miles from the nearest road, parked neatly with keys in the ignition. Inside were 3 water bottles, half full. 3 camera bags, methodically packed. The car's GPS showed it had traveled to coordinates that didn't match any road or trail. Most puzzling was what search teams found 200 yards away. The trio's phones, placed in a perfect triangle on the desert floor, all powered down at the same moment. It's like they just walked away from everything, Sheriff Ray Daniels told reporters. No signs of struggle, no evidence of foul play. People don't just evaporate, but apparently they did. What makes this case particularly disturbing are the final images recovered from Mark's camera. The last sequence shows stunning desert landscapes, but the final 3 photos tell a different story. The first shows a distant dark shape on the horizon, too blurry to identify. The second captures what appears to be a tall, thin shadow standing between 2 rock formations. The third, taken moments before their disappearance, shows nothing but sky, as if the camera had been dropped or thrown upward. Rachel locals weren't surprised. The town sits in the shadow of Area 51, where conspiracy theories bloom like desert flowers after rain. Some residents claim to have seen unusual lights in the sky that evening. Others mentioned military helicopters flying unusually low the following morning. The trio's disappearance quickly became fodder for those who believe the government hides evidence of extraterrestrial contact. The weather that day was clear, eliminating the possibility of flash floods. No predator attacks were reported. Toxicology tests on the water bottles revealed no drugs or poisons. The case turned cold faster than the desert night. Was it a planned disappearance? The evidence suggests otherwise. Carly had just announced her pregnancy to family. Ben was scheduled to be married that August. Mark had recently purchased a home. These were not people seeking to vanish. These were not people running from their lives. Perhaps the most chilling aspect of the case is the silence. No screams were heard. No distress calls made. No final desperate messages sent. 3 people, experienced in outdoor work, simply stepped away from everything they owned and disappeared into thin air. Like smoke scattered by desert wind, they were there one moment and gone the next, leaving behind only questions that hang as heavy as the Nevada summer heat. The desert keeps its secrets well. 5 years after the disappearance, hikers found a single camera lens capped 8 miles from where the car was discovered. It belonged to Mark's equipment, but offered no clues. Just another breadcrumb in a trail that leads nowhere. The mystery of what happened on that June afternoon continues to haunt everyone connected to the case, an equation missing too many variables to solve. What awaited the photography crew in that vast emptiness? What did they see that we cannot? The desert holds the answer, buried somewhere between reality and nightmare, somewhere in the shimmering heat where 3 people walked away from their lives and into oblivion. The search for the missing photography crew expanded beyond conventional methods as weeks turned to months. The FBI took over, bringing forensic specialists who analyzed every grain of sand around the abandoned vehicle. They found something odd: radiation readings slightly above normal levels in a circular pattern surrounding where the phones had been placed. Not harmful levels, but unusual enough to raise eyebrows. "We're dealing with an anomaly here," FBI Special Agent Diana Mercer explained in a confidential report later leaked online. "The radiation signature doesn't match anything we typically encounter. It's almost as if there was a momentary energy discharge in that specific location." The families refused to give up. Ben's fiancée, Melissa Wright, quit her job as a teacher to move to Rachel, renting a small trailer where she plastered walls with maps and photos. Every morning, she walked the desert, calling their names until her voice grew hoarse. Hope faded like footprints in sand, but her determination never wavered. "I feel him sometimes," she confided during a rare interview. "When the wind blows a certain way, I swear I can hear him calling back." Her eyes, red-rimmed from crying and squinting into the harsh sun, held a desperate certainty that made even skeptical reporters uncomfortable. Private investigators hired by Lens and Light magazine discovered strange inconsistencies. Satellite imagery from that afternoon showed no other vehicles in the area, yet tire tracks, not matching the rental car, were found nearby. More curious were statements from a truck driver who passed through Rachel that evening. He reported seeing 3 people walking along Highway 375 around sunset, miles from where the car was found, heading toward the base perimeter. When shown photos, he identified them as the missing crew. They were walking in perfect unison, the driver recalled. Same pace, same stride. Didn't look right. Didn't look natural. I slowed down to offer a ride, but they just stared straight ahead like they couldn't hear me. By the time authorities followed up on this lead, any physical evidence had been erased by desert winds. The military denied any involvement. Area 51 officials stated no civilians had breached the perimeter. No unusual activity had been recorded that day. Their statements came pre-written and without opportunity for questions, like form letters addressing a grievance no one had filed. Then came the recordings. Amateur radio operators in 3 different states captured strange audio bursts on the night of June 10th. When cleaned up and analyzed, some claimed to hear voices repeating coordinates. Others heard what sounded like camera shutters clicking. The most haunting interpretation came from an audio engineer who isolated what he believed were 3 voices saying in unison, "They're taking us to sea." To see what? The question lingered like heat mirages above desert pavement. The search scaled back after 6 months. Sheriff Daniels kept the case file open, but admitted privately that he had never encountered anything like it. 26 years in law enforcement, and this one keeps me up at night, he confided to a deputy. People leave traces. People make mistakes. People don't just stop existing. Mark's mother died the following year, still clutching his childhood teddy bear in her hospital bed. Carly's parents established a scholarship for photography students. Ben's articles were posthumously collected into a book. Life moved forward for everyone except those 3 souls, suspended in the mystery of that June afternoon. Wildlife cameras were eventually installed near the disappearance site, capturing nothing but coyotes and desert hares. Yet hikers and off-roaders occasionally reported feeling watched in that area. Some claimed electronic devices malfunctioned. Others described sudden temperature drops. The location gained an unofficial name among locals, the Vanishing Point. On the 3rd anniversary, something unexpected happened. All 3 families received identical text messages from unknown numbers, just a string of numbers that, when plotted on a map, formed a perfect triangle around Area 51. The messages came precisely at 3:47 p.m., the exact moment the phones had gone dark 3 years earlier. Phone companies confirmed the impossibility of this occurrence. The messages originated from the missing phones, which had never been found. Devices that should have long since lost battery power. Devices that should not have functioned after years in the elements. But the desert operates by its own rules, bending time and possibility like heat bends light. Was it an elaborate hoax? A cruel prank? Or something beyond conventional explanation? A ripple through time? A message from whatever dimension now held the missing crew? Like everything else in this case, the texts offered more questions than answers, more shadows than light. Perhaps that's why the story of the missing photography crew continues to haunt us. In an age when we believe ourselves constantly connected, constantly tracked and monitored, 3 people stepped beyond the reach of our technological web. They became ghost stories told around campfires, cautionary tales for those who venture too far from beaten paths. They remind us that for all our progress, there remain empty spaces on the map where people can still disappear without explanation, leaving behind only objects that can't speak and mysteries that won't die. The night Emily Porter vanished was the kind of cold that made your bones ache. December 24th, 1999. Millbrook, a small town in upstate New York, was blanketed in fresh snow as families gathered for Christmas Eve celebrations. No one noticed the 17-year-old slip out of her bedroom window just after midnight. No one saw her walk into the woods behind her family's farmhouse. And no one could have guessed that by morning, the only trace of Emily would be a set of footprints that ended abruptly in the middle of a clearing. Her father found them at dawn. The trail stopped as if Emily had simply vanished mid-step. No signs of struggle. No blood. Nothing but silence and the soft whisper of falling snow covering what little evidence might have existed. The police were called immediately, and within hours, the entire town had mobilized to search. They combed the woods with flashlights and dogs, their desperate calls for Emily echoing through the bare trees like ghosts. Emily's disappearance hit Millbrook hard. She wasn't the type to run away. A straight-A student with early acceptance to Cornell, Emily had everything to look forward to. Her bedroom remained exactly as she'd left it, calculus homework spread across her desk, a half-written college application essay on her computer screen, and a mug of cold hot chocolate on her nightstand. Her winter coat still hung in the closet despite the freezing temperatures outside. The search parties grew larger as news spread. Volunteers from neighboring towns joined in, trudging through knee-deep snow as helicopters circled overhead. But as day turned to night and Christmas Eve became Christmas Day, hope began to fade like warmth from a body left too long in the cold. The holidays passed in a blur of police interviews, news reporters, and unanswered questions. What made the case particularly strange were the items found scattered along Emily's trail. A silver charm bracelet she never took off, a single red mitten, and most puzzling of all, a Polaroid photograph showing Emily smiling, standing in that same clearing, but the photo appeared to have been taken that very night, developed and dropped in the snow. The timestamp read 12:17 a.m., less than an hour before her father discovered she was missing. "I don't understand, Mrs." Porter sobbed during a press conference a week later. "Who took this picture? Where's my daughter?" Her words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of maternal grief. The town police chief stood beside her, his face grim as stone as he admitted they had no leads, no witnesses, and no explanation for how a teenage girl could vanish without trace. Then the videos started appearing in people's mailboxes. Grainy VHS tapes showing fragments of what appeared to be Emily walking through the woods that night. The footage was disjointed, filmed from odd angles as if the camera operator was hiding. In some frames, Emily seemed aware she was being recorded, looking directly at the camera with an expression that wasn't quite fear, but something else. Something unknowable. The FBI took over the case in January. They analyzed the tapes, but found nothing identifiable, no landmarks, no voices, nothing that might lead them to Emily. The only consistent element was a strange distortion in the corner of each frame, like a shadow that moved independently of everything else. Some agents dismissed it as a camera defect. Others weren't so sure. As winter melted into spring, the search for Emily Porter gradually faded from national headlines. But in Millbrook, time seemed frozen in that snowy December night. The Porter family never gave up hope, even as the painful possibility that their daughter might never return grew with each passing day. And somewhere in those woods, where the footprints had long since melted away, the truth waited like a patient predator. The case might have remained just another tragic, unsolved mystery, if not for what happened exactly 6 months later, on June 24th, 2000. A hiker stumbled upon Emily's backpack hanging from a tree branch in the same clearing where she'd vanished. Inside was her journal, its pages filled with increasingly frantic entries about someone, or something, watching her from the woods in the weeks before her disappearance. The final entry, dated December 24th, 1999, contained only 5 words. "It's not human. It's coming." But the true shock came when investigators opened a sealed envelope tucked into the journal's back cover. Inside was a second Polaroid photograph, this one showing Emily Porter standing in an unfamiliar room with walls that seemed to shift and bend at impossible angles. The timestamp read 12:17 a.m., December 24th, 1999, the exact same time as the first photo. But in this image, Emily wasn't alone. Behind her stood a tall, blurred figure, its features indistinct except for 2 points of light where eyes should be. And written on the back of the photo, in handwriting that matched Emily's, were 3 words that sent chills through even the most hardened FBI agents. "Still watching me." What made the discovery even more disturbing was the condition of the backpack and its contents. Despite being exposed to 6 months of weather, everything was perfectly preserved. No water damage, no mold, not even dirt. The journal's pages were crisp, the ink unfaded. The forensics team found no fingerprints other than Emily's, not even on the outer surface of the backpack. The FBI established a new task force dedicated solely to the Porter case. They brought in experts from various fields: criminal psychology, paranormal research, even theoretical physics. The journal entries painted a picture of a girl who believed something had been stalking her for weeks, watching from the tree line while she walked home from school, tapping on her bedroom window at night. Emily described dreams where she wandered through endless corridors that shouldn't exist, pursued by something that could change its shape at will. "These are obviously the delusions of a troubled teenager," stated the lead psychologist in her report. But then why had no one, not her parents, teachers, or friends, noticed any signs of mental distress? By all accounts, Emily had been happy, well-adjusted, and excited about her future. The psychologist had no answer for that. The photograph analysis proved equally frustrating. Digital enhancement of the blurred figure behind Emily revealed nothing conclusive. Some saw a tall man in a suit, others a misshapen creature with elongated limbs. The room itself defied architectural logic, with corners that connected at impossible angles and doorways that seemed to lead nowhere. Then came the witness. 3 months after the backpack discovery, a 12-year-old boy named Tyler Matthews came forward claiming he'd seen Emily the night she disappeared. He'd been awake, watching for Santa from his bedroom window, which faced the woods behind the Porter home. According to Tyler, he saw Emily walking into the trees, but she wasn't alone. "There was someone with her," Tyler told investigators, his voice small and frightened. Or maybe not someone. It was tall and skinny, and sometimes it looked like a person, and sometimes it didn't look like anything at all. Like it was there and not there at the same time. When asked why he hadn't come forward sooner, the boy's answer was simple and chilling: "Because it told me not to." In my head, it said if I told anybody, it would come for me too. Child psychologists interviewed Tyler extensively, trying to determine if his story was genuine or the product of an overactive imagination influenced by the case's publicity. They found no evidence he was lying or confabulating. In fact, Tyler described details about the clearing that had never been released to the public, including the exact pattern of stones that formed a rough circle where Emily's footprints had ended. The Porter family moved away from Millbrook in early 2001, unable to bear the constant reminders of their missing daughter. The house stood empty for years, a silent monument to tragedy that no one wanted to buy. Local teenagers occasionally dared each other to sneak onto the property, but few had the courage to venture near the woods behind it. Those who did reported strange experiences: watches that stopped working, compasses that spun wildly, and the persistent feeling of being watched. In 2004, a new development brought the case briefly back into the spotlight. A college student doing research on missing persons came across a pattern no one had noticed before. Since 1843, when Millbrook was founded, 17 people had disappeared in those same woods, always on December 24th, always at night, and always in the same 20-year cycle. The last recorded disappearance before Emily's had been in 1979, and before that, 1959. The students' research revealed something else. Each victim had reported being watched in the weeks before they vanished. The FBI reopened the investigation, this time focusing on historical records and previous disappearances. They found old newspaper clippings, police reports, even personal diaries that corroborated the pattern. But perhaps the most disturbing discovery was a collection of photographs spanning over a century, each showing one of the missing persons on the night of their disappearance. In every photo, barely visible at first glance, but unmistakable once pointed out, was the same blurred figure standing behind them. The case of Emily Porter remains unsolved to this day. Her body has never been found. No one has been charged with her disappearance. The Porter family has tried to move on with their lives, though Emily's mother still maintains a website dedicated to finding her daughter. And in Millbrook, the locals still avoid those woods after dark. They tell their children to come inside before sunset. They don't talk about what might be watching from between the trees. And every 20 years, as December 24th approaches, the town holds its collective breath, wondering who might be next. The strangest twist came last Christmas Eve, December 24th, 2019. 20 years to the day since Emily vanished. A security camera at the abandoned Porter house captured a figure walking out of the woods just after midnight. The footage is grainy and distant, but it shows what appears to be a woman in her late 30s, wearing clothes from another era, her movement stiff as if she's forgotten how to walk properly. She approaches the house, stands looking up at Emily's old bedroom window for several minutes, then turns toward the camera. Though her face is barely visible, those who knew Emily Porter insist it's her, unchanged except for her eyes, which reflect the camera's light in a way human eyes shouldn't. Then she walks back into the woods, followed by what looks like a tall shadow that moves independently of the trees. The timer on the security footage reads 12:17 a.m. 8 stories, 8 unsolved mysteries that continue to whisper across the windswept Nevada desert. The Loneliest Road doesn't just earn its name from the desolate landscape, but from those who entered its endless horizon and never returned. If you value tales that crawl under your skin and stay there, subscribe now for more terrifying countdowns that will have you questioning your next road trip.